Jungler is ganking mid, watch out! Nah, you good actually. You're just watching Game Devs of Color Expo 2025 with me, the Purple Sharpie, farming extraordinaire and always AFK when you need me for a team fight. I am joined today by two members from Split Fate Studios, Dee, founder, lead designer, and lead producer, as well as the communications manager and script editor, Viv. Dee, Viv, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
It's a pleasure to be here again.
Dee, we had your studio here a few years ago talking about the exact game that we're so excited to announce you all having an updated demo for. Hi, Elo Girls. Can you remind us about what the purpose and focus of this game is?
So Hi, Elo Girls is a visual novel set in the esports scene. And you play as the latest recruit for an all-girls team.
And I understand you all released an updated demo today. Is that correct, Dee?
Yes. Very excited.
Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the updates and new stories that we may see inside of this updated demo?
We have had a demo out previously. That demo focused on like the very early stages of the game. So you got to see the tryout period in which the character that you're playing is actually trying out to join the actual team that she becomes part of. So with this new demo, we actually wanted to jump ahead past that and start it when you've actually moved into the gaming house with your new teammates and give a taste of like what that journey looks like, especially the jump from, previously you're talking to them a lot via like an in-game messaging system. But when you move in to like actually live with them, you're actually spending more time with them in person.
Viv, I want to go to you here because I know inside the previous interview, we talked a lot about esports culture, FGC life, and just competitive gaming environments in general. Inside of this version of the demo, it sounds like you all specifically focus on the experience inside of a quote unquote gaming house. Can you talk to us about what inspiration you all found that allowed you to make this specific aspect inside of your game?
Gaming house is kind of it's specific to the competitive gaming culture, as you've already mentioned, right? When we think about that, we think of like the viewers kind of looking at these vlogs of different esports organizations, kind of showcasing what it's like within those. And so that's where we get sort of that insight. The balance between trying to communicate with each other as teammates, but also as housemates. That's really the main thing, I would say.
Dee, I understand, I know, once again, inside the previous interview, you talked about your history, not just inside of specifically like MOBA competitive games, but also inside of the fighting game community. I understand you played Tekken, which is more of like a solo player game in that environment. The FGC isn't typically known for having large gaming houses because it's typically a solo environment. Can you talk to us a little bit more about your specific decision to put all these different personalities inside of a very close ecosystem for specifically this game?
So the game that the characters are professionally trying to play, it's like a team game that we invented ourselves. We came up with all of the character names and the sort of like setting for the fictional game that they compete in. It's really common in a lot of those team esports for like the team members to move in and share a house together. But also just, I think outside of it being whether, you're competing as a single player or you're competing on a team, really it comes down to the drive that you have to win. And how much you're going to dedicate to practicing, to getting better at that. And I think gaming houses, the idea behind them, is that you can be learning from either your teammates or, people who also compete in the game that you compete in. And you can have that focus, right? Like you're all there for a singular purpose. But I actually think it speaks to just the competitive drive that pro players of like, even fighting games, a lot of them spend time together. They work in the lab together. They actually like practice together and they try out combos and they see what works and what doesn't. And it's really about that sort of like congregating together to get better as a group.
Let's talk a little bit more about that community aspect. And Dee, I want to go back to you here because this imaginary game that you all created seems very closely related, if I may say so humbly, to Riot Games, League of Legends, Valve's Dota 2 and Dota. Maybe a little bit of inspiration. I know you all hinted about it in the last interview, but can you talk to us a little bit more about how focusing on these different aspects of that competitive gaming genre helped bring these characters to life?
So I've been in love with esports for, over a decade at this point. And something that I found so refreshing and so interesting about it is that so many different people from so many different walks of life can just come together into a scene over playing this game and over, watching professionals play the game and using what they learn from professionals to like get better at their own game. I have been a fan of Valve properties, of Riot Games properties, definitely taking a lot of inspiration from the esports scenes that have popped up around them. But yeah, it's, like esports as its own sort of ecosystem. I think it's been interesting to see how there are some universal truths like across the board from one game to the next, whether it's like a team-based game or it's, a single like player game as well. There's across all of those ecosystems, the will to get better and the will to win, I think is just, it emerges around each and every one of those communities. So, yeah.
Viv, inside of our previous interview, you stated that you had worked inside of the esports ecosystem for a brief amount of time. I'm not here to ask, obviously, who you worked for or anything along those lines, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about some of the similarities we see inside of this new updated demo occurring inside of the gaming house, with possibly some experiences you may have seen perhaps firsthand or even heard secondhand while you were inside of that ecosystem.
There's definitely a lot of parallels that I have seen between what goes on in the game and what I've seen in my own experience. Going back into the updated demo where, you as a recruit just get into the game is very akin to seeing player announcements. One major parallel that I see between the game and what actually happens in the actual esports ecosystem is this idea of this sort of storytelling parallel. And I'll talk about that in a bit. The player themselves are going through their own journey, right? They're starting off, they're like, I want to win and be the best at this game. We also have the fans who are going through and being like, I want to see where this person goes. And so they have their own story as well. Then there's this sort of like third storyline, if you will. It makes it different from traditional sports. In traditional sports, when you're rooting for a player, it's just that player and that's it. When you're in esports, however, these players take on another character that's being developed by the developers and the publishers. That character themselves also have their own story because of the way that each player plays them. It's that storyline that leads to these like show-stopping moments when fans are witnessing a game that make that character like uniquely different.
People always tell you don't play against the character, you're playing against the player who's then using the tools that character has. And I think you touched on something really interesting that, Dee, I'd actually like to go to you here. Can you tell us a little bit more about one of your favorite expressions of skill and characterization inside of this updated demo?
So something about the demo that's interesting, again, is you're sort of jumping away from just interacting with your teammates online, through a messaging app, and you're actually meeting them in person. And then when you meet them in person, you can kind of associate their play style with like their personality. We've got like a really brash, aggressive character who I'll be very frank. She plays DPS, she's very much
she's
like
my favorite, by the way. I've told you this before. Haven't I told you this?
She's also my favorite.
I'm sorry. She's my fave. Very sharpie core.
Yeah.
It's definitely fun. And people hate her. She's kind of infamous because she's very toxic and aggressive, but they also grudgingly respect her because she makes guides. Like she actually puts out a lot of content that helps people get better at the characters that they're trying to play. So she's kind of known for playing certain types of characters in that specific fictional game we've got. I think in a lot of esports games, there's a meta. So there's like what characters are the best to play at any given moment and who specializes in playing those characters. The game sort of looks at what happens when that changes in ways the team does not expect. The teammates basically are like kind of challenged to step out of what people expect them to be doing. It's asking someone who's like a strong, headstrong DPS player to start to learn to be a little bit more, team player, centric.
ADCs, take care of your support.
Exactly.
Okay? Take care of us. Thank you. No, I agree. And I'm down for the meta shift too. It needed to happen.
Yeah. So it's like on the one hand, the game itself does have kind of its own meta shift in that you're going from your virtual impressions of your teammates to like actually meeting them in person. And you have to like adjust to your perceptions of them and see whether or not you were right about how you were thinking of them. But then there is actually like an in-game fictional meta shift that like puts pressure on the team to figure out, okay, how are we going to make this work? And so the second, this new demo that we're revealing kind of tries to push into that tension of like, okay, what happens when you meet someone who you've seen them online, you've seen, their follower count, you've seen them get into fights on social media platforms. What happens when you have to live with them?
I know we're coming up on time, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask each of you this very next question, starting with you, Dee, and then going over to Viv. What has been your favorite process through this creation journey of Hi Elo Girls? It's been almost at this point a decade of development. It's a long journey, and most devs unfortunately never get to this point. But by the grace of RNGesus himself, you have. What do you have to say to other developers who may possibly be at this point and thinking, I don't know if this is worth it. I don't know if the industry is ready for this game. I don't know if we have an audience. What do you say to people like that when you work on something like Hi Elo Girls? What words of wisdom do you have for those devs?
Man, what a question.
I only give you the easy ones.
only.
No pressure.
Some of my favorite indie games that have come out recently, it's very apparent that they were made for the dev team. Like they were made for the people who sort of conceived of it and just really fell in love with that specific mechanic or that specific genre or that specific story they wanted to tell. And you can tell that they had a great time. They got a lot of fulfillment out of making it themselves. And so honestly, again, I think we couldn't have made this game unless everyone who touched it had a love for esports in some kind of fashion. Before Viv became our script editor, was doing comms, but we would still ask Viv for design, advice on does this feel right? Like writing advice, does this feel accurate? Does it feel like anything that you've experienced yourself? Because again, this is something that Viv has had their own passion for completely outside of our studio and completely outside of this game. So the best process has been working with people who all sort of just believe in what you're doing, even though it is a really niche game that we're putting out there. I think it's going to connect to people and it sort of pokes at some universal truths, but there is a barrier in that we are talking about esports. I think it's we had to embrace that this is just a niche, it's a niche community, that again, once you talk about it more, people can understand where that passion comes from. But we wanted to focus on what we love so much about the community and what's familiar to us about the community rather than trying to, make it a game for everybody. So I really enjoyed the process of just bouncing ideas off the team and understanding that we all kind of speak the same language and we get a lot of the references because we've been there, even if it was about, one esports scene versus a different one. There are a lot of overlaps. A lot of the same stuff is happening across a lot of those communities. So yeah, that was my favorite part of the process, is just working with people who understand.
That's beautiful. Viv, yours, or possibly a word of encouragement to developers in a similar state?
I'm going to echo Dee. It's almost like we both share the same brain cell when it comes to this. I would say the best part when you're making a game is you're making it with people who want to see that vision come to life, right? You all have this shared idea of we want to see our experiences sort of displayed through a piece of interactive media, which is, Hi Elo Girls, right? The pillar that's sort of gotten us through all the great parts of game dev and maybe the not so great parts of game dev, right? All the messy work that comes with it. Your main reason or your motivation for making the game is you want that vision to come to life. You want to be able to share that story with everyone else. Even if it is just a small community, it still makes an impact to those people who may have also, to some degree, also have that shared story, and it makes them feel really seen, right? And so, if I were to give any words of encouragement to anyone out there who maybe is working on a game right now, or maybe is unsure as to whether or not they should publish that game, everyone can write the story that you want. Ultimately, it's you who makes your game unique, right? Everyone can, there can be 500 esports games out there that talk about the process of being part of esports from a competitive or a corporate level. Ultimately, the only person who can publish the version of that story that you want is you. Do the work, press that publish button, start making content. Like it's going to be messy, but ultimately, like, you have to think about the end goal, and you got to think about how is it going to make you feel once you've published it on Steam.
I just want to say, as someone who's had the opportunity to now speak with both of you all twice, I'm personally very excited to see this finished, polished product, regardless of how niche it is, because it truly will be an expression not only of yourself, but of the community that I happen to occupy. Thank you both, Dee and Viv, for your time, as well as the representation. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
And if you personally are interested in looking up my LoKing scores, don't! Go over to Hi Elo Girls and wishlist the game instead, or play the updated demo, which is currently available now. In addition, look forward to the finished version of Hi Elo Girls coming out Q1 of 2026. Thank you so much for watching yet another game developer interview, courtesy of Game Devs of Color Expo.